Going to be calling on a very special gentleman on this very stage now, the Minister of External Affairs, India, Dr. S. Jaishankar. Round of applause for him, ladies and gentlemen. Ease of doing business abroad for India Incorporated. We're going to hear from him first, sir. The podium is yours, post which we're going to be calling on Pranab Samanta, Deputy Executive Editor, The Economic Times, to also come and moderate a session with him. Sir, the podium is yours.
A very good morning to all of you. It's a great pleasure to be here. Today, my remarks focus on three issues. One, what can foreign policy do for business? Two, what can business do for foreign policy? And three, where, how, and on what do we work together? So let me begin with the changing mindset in the government about business. I can say today with a great deal of confidence that if you go to an Indian embassy, they exude receptivity and extend a degree of support which perhaps Indian business would not have encountered a few years earlier. I often come across instances, policy, regulatory, operational challenges faced by our corporates abroad, which are addressed effectively by embassies, sometimes without actually our even knowing it. Now, this is not just with regard to high-value transactions. I find even SMEs today get a lot of operational support from embassies, much more than they did before. So I would start by asserting that today we are much more business-friendly than we have been. But then I would ask the question, are we there? Are we doing enough? And the honest answer to that is maybe not a no, but I would say maybe a not yet. And the related question is, do other governments do more for their businesses abroad? And the answer to that is absolutely. I see this every day in my line of work, where I see visiting presidents, prime ministers, even foreign ministers bring up business issues, sometimes very specific business issues. And today, I believe that our system has to fully appreciate that standing up for business abroad is rooting for jobs at home. Others get it. It's time we did. Now, the positive attitude must be backed up by supportive policies. And to some extent, I think we have done this over the last many years. And I would particularly today like to share with you how we have used lines of credit extended by the government to partner countries with soft rates of interest to promote our business interests abroad. Today, they number in the hundreds, these lines of credit. They've grown in scale, in complexity, in coverage, and their intent ranges from executing projects abroad to extending services and supplying products. What is common among these lines of credit is that they all have a minimum Indian content, usually 65 to 75%. And each, in their own way, has helped to provide market access abroad for our companies. Since lines of credit have a sovereign guarantee, it helps our companies to operate in difficult markets where they would normally not venture, and where they can today, with this support, showcase their capabilities and demonstrate their expertise with a high degree of confidence. It's noteworthy that some of our leading companies in India have made their first foray into our neighborhood and into countries in Africa through lines of credit. And then they have gone on to establish themselves commercially in those countries. Now, as of date, India has offered about 300 lines of credit to 64 countries, and these involve 539 projects. These initiatives, as I said, have qualitatively expanded in recent years, both the size of the LOC as well as the profile of the projects. And the planning and execution has definitely become more efficient, partly because we have an integrated whole of the government approach with very strong oversight, an oversight which I would tell you goes all the way up to the Prime Minister himself. And as a result, we are today completing projects at the rate of 2 large projects a month. And if I were to take grassroots projects, we call them high impact development projects, we are actually doing 4 projects a week, sometimes in different parts of the world. And this, if I say so myself, is not a small achievement. Now, the bulk of the LOCs and projects are with Africa, because we've really made a huge commitment to Africa, and I'd like to speak about that. But today, these number 321 projects involving 205 lines of credit. But we also have 181 projects in Asia, 32 projects in Latin America and the Caribbean, and some projects in Central Asia and Oceania. If you look now, these are lines of credit. We supplement them with grant assistance at times. And if you look at that, today our footprint, our development footprint stretches all the way from the Caribbean to the Pacific Islands. And I believe that this has certainly been one of the factors which has helped to make our diplomacy more global. Now, where development partnerships are concerned, I would say no question our most successful example has been with Bhutan, with whom we've had a long and very productive history in the power sector. But we've had iconic projects in the rest of the neighborhood, rail bridges in Bangladesh, reconstruction of the railway tracks in Sri Lanka after 2009, road projects and power transmission to Nepal, and most recently the Metro Express in Mauritius. In Africa, our prominent projects have been in the power sector, in Sudan, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, Malawi, in water, in Mozambique, Tanzania, and Guinea, in health, in Cote d'Ivoire, Guinea, and Zambia, and in sugar in Ethiopia, in cement in Djibouti. So it's a fairly long list. And the interesting point is, in many cases in Africa, some of the manufacturing plants that we have helped to set up are really the first of their kind in those countries. So cumulatively, they've been a testimony to our economic capabilities and to our national branding, and in that sense, they've become a foundation on which Indian companies can operate more effectively and expand their business development efforts. And one example we have seen of that is that the demand for buyer's credit from Africa has actually gone up very significantly in the last few years. Now, the same logic, incidentally, applies to the supply of goods and services. And it's interesting that if you look at our market penetration, if you take buses, for example, we've used really LOC's lines of credit for buses to Bangladesh and Senegal, dredging ships, construction equipment to Bangladesh. Rail locomotives, wagons, and coaches have again been a big beneficiary. We've supplied them to Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Angola, Mozambique. Jeeps, in many cases, ambulances, medical equipment. So each of these examples have really made a visible reputational difference in the recipient countries. And today we are taking this LOC mechanism into the defense realm. We have done a number of defense lines of credit, and this is part of our defense export policy. The short point which I wanted to make, therefore, is other than, we do advocate business interests, we do lobby on occasion when we have concerns about the policy of a particular country which affects our business interests. But we also today have concrete mechanisms, vehicles which support our business when they go abroad, and I think that's a message which needs to be positively appreciated. Now, my purpose of saying all of this is not to blow our own trumpet, even though it sounds nice doing so. There are some serious messages that I would like the Indian business community to hear, appreciate, to support. Economic diplomacy is today at the heart of diplomacy. And if you take any of our policies, neighborhood first, Act East, or Africa policies, I would stress that what we have done through the economic channels have really made the difference out there. And if brand recognition, market access, business developments, these are practical measures of support. But I do believe that there's a larger strategic intent and a strategic purpose, a strategic message, which business and government can convey together. So that brings me to the second proposition: what can business do for foreign policy? And here's the answer. In investments, supply chains, and trade by business makes our neighborhood foreign policy credible today. It creates a larger sense of regionalism, and that, I believe, is key to our rise. And it helps to create a connectivity which is central to that endeavor. Secondly, if there is a sense today of an extended neighborhood, that is because of the economic connect. Whether it is the ASEAN or the Gulf, it's all about trade, investment, and services. Ask them in Singapore or in Dubai, and you'll get that answer. Third, our major power relationships are heavily business-driven too. We today take this stage of India-US relations for granted, but that was not always the quality of our relationship. And the fact is, if you look back, actually it was the dot-com revolution which was the inflection point of our relationship with the United States. So to differing degrees, we are markets, we are consumers, we are technology partners, we are supply sources, we are service providers in the eyes of the rest of the world. And I have seen myself how effectively sometimes big investments can actually determine the very perception of India in many societies. And sometimes it takes just one investment to make a difference. So the point I would make here is, at the end of the day, foreign policy is built on economic muscle, and that is why key foreign policy challenges, whether of connectivity, technology, global architecture, they are best addressed in partnership with business. So let me come to those challenges and where we can work together. We are today rapidly bridging the connectivity deficit that has constrained our prospects till now. And let me look at South Asia itself. With Bangladesh, 4 of the pre-1965 cross-border rail links have been restored, and the other 2 will be completed this year. The 2 countries are now discovering their shared waterways for trade and transport, including a new river terminal at Daikhowa. With Myanmar, the Kaladan project and the trilateral highway have both progressed substantially. And with Nepal, other than the power transmission I spoke about, we are setting up integrated checkpoints to smoothen logistics. And we have a substantial road building scheme which would ease up movement of goods. With Bhutan, I had mentioned the power generation history. With Afghanistan, all of you are aware of the Chabahar port, which is still work in progress. Perhaps less prominent has been the air corridor, which has given air freight corridor, which has given Afghan business a different window. With Sri Lanka, we have important initiatives today underway in the port sector and energy. Negotiations are going on. And most of our neighbors, it's very interesting to note, in the last 5 years have started sourcing electricity and fuel from India. Their goods transit us more comfortably, as indeed do ours. And we see an increase in joint ventures, and the vision of Indian growth as a larger lifting tide for the region is beginning to be a reality. Now, India's outlook towards development partnerships obviously reflect our larger worldview. It is demand-driven, it is consultative, and it respects the interests of our partner countries. This applies, the same mindset applies to our connectivity approach as well. It is a subject on which we have made policy pronouncements, but I would like to remind you today that connectivity is not just an immediate requirement. I mean, connectivity is the answer to creating a more regionalized neighborhood, but we have moved beyond the neighborhood to the extended neighborhood, That's why I spoke of Myanmar, to the Indian Ocean, where we have some important connectivity initiatives underway, and it's a question of time before it reaches Africa as well. And why I stress connectivity is today the new great game. It shapes choices and builds linkages that could well determine the relationships of states. India's views on connectivity, as I said, were made clear in 2017 and have been reiterated since. We have actually been the pioneering voice of a global conversation on this subject. In essence, our view is that the world is best served by a connectivity that is transparently debated, collaboratively envisaged, is commercially viable, financially sustainable, environmentally friendly, and has local participation. This is a domain where we are seeing different and diverse interests in action, and we, of course, are open to working with those countries who think similarly to us. The other big issue today in global conversations is technology, and the fact is that technology may have always been a driver of global politics, but never more so than now. Its promise, especially for a country like India, is enormous, and we are seeing that unfold most of all in the digital domain. As we all know, this has created its own issues of data protection and data security, but from the vantage of foreign policy, there are some aspects that need greater deliberation as a national approach. The first is to appreciate that by its very nature, technologies are strategic, whether in their capability, in their deployment, or in their consequences. And like connectivity, technology too will create its own debates, constraints, and compulsions. The management will inevitably acquire greater salience with the passage of time. And in a world with a growing knowledge economy, the flow of talent will surely become a key variable as global competition is more innovation-led. How we fare in the domains of education, digitization, skills, and startups will determine our relevance and standing. But the bottom line is that both businesses and foreign policy will have from these developments a more powerful hand for India to play in the global arena. A world that is more narrowly economic will surely give greater salience to trade negotiations. And we see that today, whether it is the behavior of America, the strategy of China, the approach of Japan, or the focus of Europe. As a nation that is still to integrate itself into global supply chains, develop its infrastructure to global levels, and scale up its capabilities, these are not easy times for India. The debate between opportunities and risks is consequently both active and open. At stake is the livelihood of many, a concern underlined by the experience of large deficits and hollowed out sectors of the economy. Obviously, in a globalized world, no economy can be an island to itself. But the exercise of engagement and its terms must be objectively assessed. Trade outcomes must be primarily justified by trade calculations, not by political correctness. Their gains must be visible, probable, and practical, not just hypothetical scenarios. Above all, they must promote manufacturing as the mainstay of the economy, not undermine it. Having stressed that, I would readily accept that there are strong strategic aspects to such negotiations, and that is why we are following a whole-of-the-government approach on this vital issue. The rise of India is underway, and it is based, amongst others, on the rise of Indian businesses. Many of them operate abroad, and as per global norms, expect the support of the government. They are entitled to it, and our obligation is to provide it. The quest to expand market access and market shares is entirely understandable. Here too, they deserve our full backing, and I can assure you we'll get it. Our businesses will be more effective and efficient if they enjoy more friendly connectivity. Creating that is our shared endeavor. Our collaboration is equally important in the appreciation and deployment of technologies. And we are all equally well served by a smoother flow of talent across the world. Recent events have only underlined the importance of supply multipolarity, and its emergence requires a more robust government-business partnership. Today, business is appreciated not just as creator of wealth or even of jobs. Brand India has many facets for the world, and Business India is one of its most important. Your success is part of our success, and as you go out in the world, count on us, we are there for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jaishankar. Thank you, Dr. Jaishankar, for your time. I know we are short on time, so I'll come straight to the point. We heard the Prime Minister yesterday, and he said that from the days of being equidistant from countries, today we want to be friends with everybody. We go the whole distance. But at the same time, we see today a lot of the liberal world, whether it's the human rights activists or whether you see the Democrats in the US, they're angry with India. Also, we have seen remarks of the Khamenei from Iran. So are we losing friends, or are we just not able to explain to them what the rationale of certain recent decisions have been?
Maybe we're getting to know who our friends really are. Look, I think there are two different issues here. One, and I think Prime Minister's remarks kind of touched on that, is a kind of a geopolitical assessment. That there was a time when India was very defensive, our capabilities were less, our threats were more, the risks were higher. So we adopted a policy of, in a sense, of managing the world but kind of staying away. We can't do that anymore. We are the 5th largest economy in the world. We will one day be the 3rd largest economy in the world. I mean, the nature of the world has changed. So as we get more capable, as our confidence level goes, as our interest in the world goes, as their interest in us go, we have to do the management, but in a very different way. We have to engage everybody and find it's like a sort of a portfolio management. You know, how do you kind of spread your bets and get the best out of a larger scenario? The second issue you raised, see, to my mind, that is a issue of a changing world. It's an issue of a changing world, of a changing India. I think when you, and by the way, the Prime Minister touched on that also, which is that we can't let governance challenges go unaddressed. It's not the mindset of this government to just let important issues pass without decisively addressing many which should have been addressed very much earlier. Now, when you address that, you obviously disturb the status quo. I think he spoke about that. And people who have sort of proclaimed themselves to be the judges of political correctness and arbiters of, public policies, obviously will get ruffled. Now, there will be those debates. Those debates are legitimate. I mean, that's what a democratic world, a democratic society is about. Those debates are happening in India. Those will happen outside. But I would say, in a sense, you will have a big geopolitical constituency out there in the world. You will also have people who understand the changes of India, who agree with it. You will have people who may not agree with it. But I wouldn't mix apples and oranges. I think these are two different processes at work. But I'll come out ahead at the end of it.
But the opposition that you faced on the CAA, for instance, and do you think India has not been able to explain its position, or it has been misunderstood, or is there something we could have done better over here?
No. See, look, you are from the media, okay? You are from the media, you write, and you talk, and you listen to yourself. There are sections of the world outside the media. No, not you. But my point is, look, I engage governments. Okay, I was in Brussels. I had 27 foreign ministers in a room to whom I was talking. So the point we make on CA is, it cannot be anybody's case that a government or parliament doesn't have the right to set the terms of naturalization or citizenship. Every government does that, every parliament does that. What we have tried to do is, we have a large number of stateless people in this country. We have tried to reduce the number of stateless people through this legislation. That should be appreciated. We have done it in a way in which we don't create a bigger problem for ourselves. And everybody, when they look at citizenship, has a context and has a criteria. Show me a country in the world which says everybody in the world is welcome. Nobody does that. I mean, look at the Americans, look at the Europeans. I can give you examples for every European country. What is the criteria for citizenship that they do? And there is some social criteria.
The United Nations Human Rights Council director doesn't seem to agree with you.
Sure, she's been wrong before. No, including, and I give you an example. I've seen from the same body reports about the situation in Jammu and Kashmir, where you see how carefully they skirt around that cross-border terrorism problem, as though somehow it has nothing to do with the country next door. So, please understand also where they are coming from. Look at the record of how they have handled this issue in the past.
I'll let you off on that for now. Just two small issues. You did speak about trade. So moving out of RCEP, at the end of it, was it a business decision or was it a strategic decision? Or driven by business interests or strategic?
No. To my mind, that's my central point today. There's no difference. I can't have a strategy for India which is bad for Indian business. Then I'm hurting my national strategy. Because today, what is India? Indian business is at the heart of India. They are creators of wealth, they are creators of jobs, they keep this country going. So I cannot make a decision about, for me, a decision about India and Indian business interests are the same.
Moving back on RCEP was in the interest of Indian business.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, we were looking at our experience of the last 20 years, looking at the non-tariff barriers which we face from many of the very countries in that room. This is not a sort of secret. We have said it before. Look, there are businesses, Indian businesses, which are globally competitive. Okay, and I give you the two most obvious cases, which is pharmaceuticals and the IT business. Look at their penetration of the RCEP economies, and look me in the eye, and then tell me this is comparative advantage or your market standing. It's not. So, today when I hear people talking protection, who should hold up a mirror to what their own economies are about?
The future of trade will be on tariffs or on standards when we look at it in the future for us.
I think the world is moving from tariffs to standards. It's obviously, it's never one or the other. It's a mix. The Americans have brought tariffs back into play in a way. This is a question really which my colleague should be answering. But as a general observation and a former and brief businessman, I can tell you that we also should move more towards standards.
Lastly, you mentioned that decisions on technologies are also strategic decisions. Did you have 5G in mind when you were discussing?
I have all technologies in mind. It's a generic sort of observation. I didn't.
Have any specific views on how we should approach 5G as such?
No, I think those are views which another cabinet colleague should come and talk to you about.
Okay, the last question. You've seen the US-Taliban deal, and then we also saw it fraying rather quickly. And so where are we on that, and what is the Indian approach going to be? And lastly, do you think there is a recognition of the fact that Pakistan is now the central problem in the region rather than just mentioning Taliban?
Look, this could be a full session, okay? So, but I really have to run. So I just make this point that I believe that today we Indians have a very high standing in Afghan society. People genuinely like us. A lot of the work we have done is appreciated. And when it comes to Afghanistan, my own sense is sometimes, people, we tend to be too hard on ourselves. I think we have influence. I think we have a record. I think, we have friends in Afghanistan and around Afghanistan. And my own sense is that the serious conversations about Afghanistan have only now just begun. I mean, we are entering a new phase. So that phase has only begun just now. So you are suggesting somehow in your remarks that we are at some kind of end game, and where are you? I would say the end game of one phase is really the sort of the first wicket of the Pakistan is the neighbor. I mean, it's the proximate neighbor with a larger border. Our border with Afghanistan is smaller than Pakistan's, obviously. But you have to ask yourself, what has Pakistan done in the last 20 years? What has been their contribution? So what is their mindset? So I think most people know that. I mean, we are not saying anything which people in the business are not aware of. So look, eventually all of us have reputations, records, friends, partners, interests. It will play out. It will not play out in a hurry, but it will play out.
Thank you, Dr. Jaishankar. I know you're in a hurry. Thank you for your time.